Hello and welcome to KJ's Corner, KJ's Crash Course Exercise 9 of the Advanced Series. Is a continuation of the Crash Course, where today I'm going to teach y'all how to add variables inside of your selectors. Main reason for this is you're probably not going to need to use it very often, especially as it pertains to UI automation. However, there are times where you deal with applications where the only thing and the only way that you can that you can perform a specific action is if you can use like a specific ID, a specific description, type, whatever the case may be, to click an item, right-click an item, whatever the case may be, to get to the next step of your automation, okay? And when that happens, right, what are you going to do if you can't put the actual like ID tag or whatever you need to inside of a selector? You know as well as I do, if I choose a selector on this, it's probably going to go try to find this every single time that it has it, or the first row. So how do I do this dynamically? So I'm going to build you a quick little exercise to show you how to add it inside of a selector. So then that way you can try to do that moving forward. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is let's get started like we always do. And we're going to call this selectors inside, or variables inside selectors. Wow, excuse me. Selectors, there we go. Blank process. It would just be adding a variable inside of a selector. Right. You can do that. I believe we can also use, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we can, oh, sorry about that. I believe we can also use like indexes, or not indexes, but like if you're looping through an array or looping through a table, you can use that as well. I'll just show you how to do the variable, and then I'll show you how to do both. Okay. So let's hit create and let's get started here. And if you want to go ahead while that's loading up, log into your Acme test environment, acme.test@uipath.com. Go to the work items page, and we're going to use this explicitly, where our exercise is actually going to highlight every single one of these work item IDs with like a few steps, which is going to be pretty awesome. Okay. So first thing we're going to do, you can leave everything as is. Super, super simple. What we're going to do is we are actually going to use the table extraction activity. All right. So just to get a nice little, table data here, it's going to ask click to add new column to get started. We've done this before. Click that button. Oh, wait, our stuff's so awesome. It's going to pull all of that data for us. Fantastic. We're going to hit save and close, and that's going to generate our extract data table that we need. Okay. Now we don't need to do pagination. That's why I hit no. That's why I hit no on the, are we extracting data from other pages? We're just going to move on here and use that. Now you could do the pagination and that would work, but then you need to work on logic. I'm just showing you the functionality of adding a variable inside of a selector. Okay. You might have covered this during the selectors in studio training, but in case we missed it, I think this is an important thing to highlight. All right. So now what we're going to do is we are going to pull in a for each row in a data table, right? And then what are we looking for inside of extract data table? Now, if we knew what the value was, I'll show you the variable in a moment and how we can highlight it without this, but I'm just going to show you the functionality and how cool this can be. Okay. So what we're going to do is that much like you'd expect, you can click a, something you can type into, etc. But we also have this highlight feature. It doesn't do anything, but it highlights something on the screen. And that's what we're going to use for this exercise, because candidly, if we click one of these IDs, it's not going to do anything. All right. So let's pull in the highlight, and then let's just indicate this box, this top one. Okay. And then we're going to dig a little deeper. So as you can see how the selector is generating table, is leaf, and then you see that active accessibility name for the text. So if we decided to leave that, all right, what do we think's going to happen? So I'll change the duration to, we'll make it just 2 seconds, right? And you can change the color if you want. If you have a certain color preference, we have a bunch of them here. I'm actually kind of amazed we have so many. But to that point, I'm going to leave it as gold. But what do you think's going to happen here if I run this? Do you think it's going to actually highlight every row in the ID, or do you think it's going to find the first one? I'm going to vote it's going to find the first one, but I'd love to hear what you have to say while we run this. Actually, I can't really hear you anyway, so why am I saying that? Let's find out what happens when we run that. So we know that there's how many rows of data? 10, right? But here's what happens. It's highlighting that top one. Why? Because the actual selector itself has that work item ID baked into the selector. So what we want to do is make that dynamic in nature. So then that way we can make sure that it actually highlights all of those. And if we take that a step further, we can say, oh, if work item ID equals this, highlight it. And we'll even cover that example as well. Okay. So moving on here, what we need to do is we need to take the actual current row item and throw it into the data table. Now, a way to check to make sure we grab the right index, there's this test extraction feature. Go ahead and click that, and we can see, oh, work item ID is the second one. So now that we know that it's the second one, we can close that down. And then in this, we need to go to the fuzzy selector here. And I've got this pulled out so we can make it big. So remember, click the activity, properties, fuzzy selector, and you see the AA name here. That correlates to, you guessed it, that first work item ID. Might look a little different as you may have a different work item ID. What we're actually going to do is the following. So we're going to delete that. Make sure you see those single quotes there. We're going to add a double quote. Then we're going to do a plus current row item. And then 2, because we know it's the third column, 2 string. Then add another plus, and let's add the quotes. And then I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. Yeah, let's zoom in a little bit so y'all can see that. So right there. And then I'm just going to paste the same thing here. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So that's your syntax at the end. Click OK. Save. And then when you run it, it should actually iterate through all of them because it's actually using the work item ID inside of the selector instead of using that static one that was in the strict selector before, or the fuzzy selector before. So you can see, highlights the first one, and voila, highlights the second one, and the third, and so on and so forth. We'll let that finish out before we proceed here. So using that is a simple, easy way to add quote-unquote variables into your logic. Alternatively, we could do this. You could do it at the strict level as well. I'm going to do an if statement just to kind of tie this all together. But let's say instead of using the fuzzy selector, we wanted to use the strict selector. I actually sometimes like the strict selector. When you hit the strict selector, it gives you our UI Explorer capability, and it allows you to dig deeper. Fuzzy selector usually works about 99% of the time, but sometimes using the actual strict selector works. But in order to use a strict selector and add this, you do have to have a variable, which is why I'm covering it. So as you can see, we can see table row 2, table column 2, and all of these different things. And feel free to click around in this and see kind of what's going on. It's all of the HTML. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take away the isleaf and table row, and then I'm going to check the AA name instead to create this nice little feature here. And then you'll see highlight. All right. And then we know that that's valid. So then it generates a selector like this. So then what we would do is what we can do to kind of just see the same functionality is just do a nice little assign here. Pull that in. And then just create string. We'll call this WID. Right. What are we saving? Current row item. Same to string. Right. And then highlight. And then instead, because we have targeting methods, we decided to check strict selector and use that. Right. You can't type in current row. Doesn't work for that functionality. All the future functionality has been put in fuzzy selector, but you can solve it with if I right click, use variable ID, or you can hit the drop down and see what's been there, hit confirm. Right now, you're not going to be able to validate that result because it doesn't know what the value is going to be, but you should still get the same result here once we pull that in. So let's just run this to make sure that that works as well. And we see highlighted the first one, and the second one, and the third, and we'll let this finish out before we proceed here. Awesome. So as we have the assign, an easy thing to do is, let's say we only want to highlight one specific thing. You can always add in an if statement as well and say if work item ID, and then let's just pull one. Let's just do this one, right? Equals this, then highlight this, right? Because now we know this selector already has the work item ID that we're looking for, else do nothing. So we should see this only highlight once. So just seeing how quick it is to add additional logic based on business requirements, etc. You get the idea, and we see it highlighted only that specific one, and we were done. So that concludes adding variables into selectors, right? You can obviously, if you're using fuzzy selector logic, add items from an array, a data table, etc. If you are using strict selector logic, which sometimes allows us to break things down a little bit easier, in the more old school fashion, you just need to create a variable to do the same thing. This is KJ signing off, and I believe next time I will see y'all, we are going to walk through completing the advanced exercises, which is going to be probably long, but a ton of fun. So until then, I'll see y'all later. Cheers, guys.